Thanks very much for your time. The Treasurer pointing to the impact in the UK and France, the US, Canada, all much worse than Australia's 7%. Is the point, essentially that it could have been a lot worse if not for the health story being as good as it has been in this country?
Well, look, I mean, the coronavirus pandemic has hit economies around the world very hard. It has hit our economy very hard. And today is a hard, tough day for Australia. And many Australians have gone through a difficult period over the last 6, 7 or so months. And there's no sugarcoating this, but Australia did go into this crisis, which is an external event. It's something that was beyond our control. I mean, Australia did go into this crisis in a stronger position than others. We were able to respond to the health threat more swiftly than others and more effectively.
Because it could have been 20%.
And in June, July, our economy was heading back in the right direction to the extent that jobs were being restored. 280,000 jobs were restored in the economy in June, for example. But then, of course, the outbreaks in Victoria happened, and that had a renewed, very negative impact on the economy as a whole.
But Treasury in March saying it could have been 20% contraction.
Well, I mean, there's no question that things are not as bad as they could have been. They're certainly not as bad as they are in many other parts of the world. They're still bad. But we know why we're here. We know what has caused this. And we do know that, the fundamentals of the Australian economy are sound. And when we get out of this on the other side, we will have a strong economic and jobs recovery. In
recent decades, it's largely been the RBA that's had to lead the economy out of downturns via rate reductions. That scope for the RBA is not there. So how is the government going to stimulate private sector investment?
Well, we have already provided, historically unprecedented fiscal support into the economy. One, to of course provide, a safety net under the economy to cushion the blow of the coronavirus hit on the economy. We have also, and that's perhaps not, as widely known given the prominence of JOBKEEPER and the enhanced job seeker program, but we have provided very significant incentives for businesses to invest in their future growth and success already through our instant asset write-off arrangements for businesses with a turnover of up to $500 million, through our accelerated depreciation arrangements. Clearly in the context of the budget, we are assessing what more we can do in terms of providing the appropriate incentives to business, lowering the tax burden, providing incentives to businesses to invest so that they have the best chance to grow and will hire more Australians, but also to reduce the regulatory burden on business, reducing the cost of doing business, reducing the cost of energy for business, making sure that we give our exporting businesses the best access to markets around the world, pursuing our skills and training agenda to ensure that the workforce is in the best position to take advantage of these opportunities. So there are a lot of things that we have been doing, that we continue to do, and that we will do. And in the budget, we will have our next instalment of our 5-year plan to maximise the strength of the economic recovery.
And so on that budget, is there the prospect that you'll bring forward all the tax cuts?
Well, look,
because the next two phases were scheduled for 2022 and then 24-25. Given the urgency, given the this unprecedented situation we're in, why not bring them all forward to this year?
Interesting suggestions. I'm not going to deliver, obviously, the budget for you tonight, but I can tell you, and I think that the Prime Minister, the Treasurer, all of us, myself, we've all confirmed that we are looking at how we can further adjust tax policy settings with a view of maximising the strength of the economic recovery moving forward. And, clearly, we have already legislated $300 billion worth of income tax relief. To the extent that we can do more in order to facilitate stronger growth moving forward, of course, we will be considering that. But we're also very much considering what we can do to give businesses the confidence and the encouragement to invest in their future profitability, their future success, their future growth, because growing businesses will hire more Australians.
Yeah, indeed. That flat rate, though, that you announced a few years ago, 2018, it sounded quite drastic at the time, a flat rate for all those earning up to $200,000. Now it seems almost a minor change, given how crazy things are in terms of the economy. Now's the time for big changes, isn't it? Because it's needed to pull us out of this mess.
Well, I mean, the tax reforms that we pursued and legislated in the past were the right reforms for the time, and they were designed to put Australia on the strongest possible economic growth trajectory from where we were at that time. Clearly, I mean, we have been dealing with a 1-in-100-year event, a serious hit on our economy, and we do have to reassess whether the policy settings can be further improved. And that
do you think people are more open to that? Because certainly the sense I get from talking to family, people in business, whatever else, they want something to happen.
Well, I think that Australians overwhelmingly understand that we can't continue moving forward forever and a day this crisis-level expenditure, which is here to facilitate the best possible transition through this period. But Australians also understand that we do need to put reforms in place that will ensure that businesses will invest, that businesses have the best chance to grow, because we know that growing businesses will hire more people.
And the incentive for workers too, via the tax system, obviously, which you've been arguing for a long time. Do you also, as a member of the Razor gang for so long, does it weigh upon you how long it's going to take to pay all this back?
Well, look, I mean, I'm relieved, and I'm really, truly and genuinely relieved that we had the opportunity to repair our budget over our first 6 years in government. I mean, we put our budget on a stronger, more sustainable trajectory, and we went into this crisis in a fiscally stronger position compared to what we inherited in terms of the outlook. And so that has enabled us to provide very significant support through this crisis. And the Australian economy will return to growth. We will return to growth, we believe, above trend for a period. And there will be an opportunity for us, of course, on the back of stronger growth, to generate increased revenue and also to bring down that expenditure on income support, welfare payments again, as people return back to work.
Is your home state of WA, has it been vindicated with the hard border? Because the Treasurer there, Mr White, says that their state has not, or your state hasn't contracted as much as the national economy has, or as much as Victoria and New South Wales has, the two states most affected.
I'm not sure that Victoria is a valid comparison, given what's been happening in Victoria in terms of the extent of the outbreak. But I mean, look, Western Australia, the West Australian economy, of course, is contributing to our national economy in a very important way as a result of the resources sector in Western Australia, the agricultural sector. I mean, both resource exports and agricultural exports have been maintained at high levels. Prices are very strong. I mean, the price of iron ore, which in our budget is assumed to reduce to $55 US a tonne, continues to run at about $115 US a tonne. So, I mean, there are a lot of things that the West Australian economy is contributing appropriately. I mean, talking about state borders specifically, when there is a place in a crisis context to pause and to give yourselves the tools to best to manage the risks that you're facing in the best possible way. But moving forward, and I'm sure that the Premier in Western Australia would agree with this, I mean, we do need to get ourselves into a position where we can get back to as close as normal as possible, where we can, in a practical and common sense way, facilitate the strongest possible economic recovery by opening those borders in a way that is COVID safe. And that ought to happen as soon as possible, in a way that is sensible, but certainly as soon as possible.
You spoke about the iron ore price. It's interesting because, for the WA perspective and Mark McGowan, obviously, wanting to continue a strong trading relationship with China, we're in a difficult time in terms of that relationship. How would you like to see that unfold over coming weeks and months? Would you like to see both sides take, an off-ramp in terms of the escalating tensions? Because right now it seems that some of the rhetoric, not just in China but in Australia as well, as part of the debate, it's only heading in one direction.
Well, I mean, the Australian government is committed to having the best possible bilateral relationship with China. It's, our relationship with China is clearly a very important trade relationship. It's an important strategic relationship. It is a relationship where both countries, draw. It's a mutually beneficial relationship. It's a relationship where both parties draw benefit out of, in particular, our trading relationship. But, in any relationship, from time to time, there are issues that will arise on which there is a difference of opinion. And, our view would be that where there is a difference of opinion, these issues ought to be worked through in a positive and constructive and a mutually respectful fashion. And that is certainly that is certainly our commitment, and that is the way we're approaching it.
Let's, if we return back to the emergency response, JobKeeper, Labor says you shouldn't be reducing it in the face of this economic crisis, the teeth of the crisis, pretty much. What do you say to that in terms of tapering the size of JobKeeper?
Well, I fundamentally disagree with them. It's very important that we manage an appropriately well-calibrated phasing out of this historically unprecedented crisis-level support. There was an initial crisis. We responded to the crisis. We enabled the economy to adjust its settings in the context of the coronavirus pandemic hitting us unexpectedly. But moving forward, we've got to allow the economy to adjust. We've got to allow businesses to adjust. We've got to get ourselves into the new normal in as efficient a way possible, so that the economy can start growing again from its new base. And if we continue to provide support that essentially delays the level of adjustment that is required, then what it means is that we will delay the recovery.
Yeah. So does that mean a further tapering as of March next year is inevitable as well?
Well, I'm not going to preempt. I mean, this has been, looking back, a rapidly evolving situation, and the government has demonstrated that we were prepared to respond pragmatically to a rapidly evolving situation. And as the facts change, our decisions were made consistent with that revised context. And moving forward, that is what I expect that we will continue to do. But from where I sit here now, the intention is to phase out that historically unprecedented crisis-level support by the end of March in a carefully calibrated, responsible fashion. And that is what we think is important to maximise the strength of the recovery on the other side.
Tony Abbott, the former Prime Minister, has spoken about virus hysteria. He says, now that each of us have had 6 months to consider the pandemic, to make our own judgments about it, surely it's time to relax the rules so that individuals can take more responsibility and make more of their own decisions about the risks they're prepared to run. Is that an argument that resonates with you?
Well, look, I haven't read the speech in detail. Some of the things that have been reported, I disagree with. Clearly, when you talk about a public health threat and a pandemic of this nature, decisions that individual Australians make, can have very significant consequences for the community as a whole. So, in that context, it is appropriate that we make, decisions in that context. The Australian government's approach has very clearly been: we're committed to protecting people's lives, protect people's health, and protect people's lives. We're also committed to protect people's livelihoods, and we've got to do both. We've got to continue to do everything we can to minimise, to the greatest extent possible, the risk of further outbreaks, so that we can also increase and reopen to the greatest extent possible and maximise the level of economic activity to the greatest extent possible in a way that is COVID safe. When you're hit with an unexpected crisis, you've got to pause, you've got to give yourself the tools to manage the risk, and testing, tracing, rapid response to outbreaks, and COVID safe work practices in workplaces around Australia, so that there's minimum risk and maximum opportunity to restore the economy to the highest level possible.
You've been around this place for a while. You've only got 3 or 4 months left. Are you able to contemplate that? Because you're obviously in the face of budget preparations, whatever else, but your time in Parliament's going to wrap up shortly.
Look, I love this job. I'm part of a great team. I'm going to give it my everything until the last day, the last minute that I have the privilege of being in this job. And, when Parliament is sitting, you don't have much time for self-contemplation. So I'm just focused on the job.
That's true. Mathias Cormann, thanks. We'll talk to you soon.